Alright, the Ralsie theory has been stuck in my mind for a few months. Of course, someone had already beat me this by at least a month, which I discovered a day or two ago. But I'm just gonna say my version. I believe Ralsie is a persona, or persona I prefer, for Chris. Mainly because due to the polarity in how Chris is. Chris seems to be the outcast of the city, unsocial, and based on the fact that his parents are divorced, older brother's gone away, he's kind of going through something. Then you had Ralsie. Ralsie is very cheerful, can easily talk to anybody, and very lovable character. Anybody can accept him. While Chris has to, kind of has to work for it. And not only that, there's also the fact that there's the demon horn thing, where Chris had demon horns for Halloween pretending to be a monster like everybody else. This might be an indication that Chris was trying to be a monster to fit into his family, be the perfect him. And so happens Ralsie seems to be a goat-like creature like his family, further implying that Chris might have wanted to be not only perfect in his vision, but also perfect for his family. But there's also some other things to consider. One theory is the Ralsie betrayal, which I have a feeling might be an inevitable part of the game. Not because it's a popular theory, but because of Chapter 3 and the end of Chapter 2. In the end of Chapter 2, we see Chris, making a fountain. And knowing that Ralsie is supposed to be the perfect reflection of Chris might cause some interesting reaction. As we know, Ralsie is trying to keep the balance between light and darkness, and he will likely feel betrayed upon learning this information later on in the story. So because so, he might resort to, I don't know what to say this, but disarming his allies for the sake of protecting the balance. But there's also one thing I noticed. Ralsie still carries some of the impurities of Chris. One thing is noted that Ralsie still has still was lonely, similarly like Chris was. Especially when considering that his entire kingdom was desolate when we first meet him. And in the Ralsie betrayal, I have a feeling that we're more likely gonna get a path where Ralsie is having an entire conversation to himself, explaining how he worked for everything to maintain the balance, and how he was supposed to be the perfect one, and also supposed to be a guide for Chris, but ended up being for nothing, in a way. But I also feel like in the end of the battle, if you choose to spare Ralsie, you'll come to him. If you choose to attack him, he will just put on the black suit as a symbol of coping. But I also feel like if you go to the snow route, there's also the possibility that Susie will more likely let's say this. I have a feeling versus Susie will come back as a boss fight towards Chris, and pretty much in the words of Naruto, I'll bring you back even if I have to break every single bones of yours. Well, a reinterpretation of what he said, or rephrasing. Another theory that I believe that is also worth considering is the dark world reflections upon one's ideas. This idea did not originate by me, but something I adopted from a comment section for a video for the psychology of Deltarune for Snowgrave, which I'll leave an image of it. Okay, so one dude theorized that, or woman theorized that, now the dark world is a reflection on the ideal world or somebody's mind of themselves. The person took note how chapter 1 might be a reflection on Susie, since around the entire area there's food and she gets to goof off, and then there's Lancer, which kind of serves a bit like Ralsie for Chris. And there's also theory that Susie might came from a rather poor family, which also might have been either A, reflected by the king, and B, the indications of her clothing. We can't really find her. I also kind of feel like the king might also be a reflection of her character as well. And there's also the fact that people also point out that Chapter 2 might be a reflection for Noel's world. Some you might be saying Birdie because he's a gamer, but people just point out that the queen is more like a mother to Noel. Especially when considering the fact that Noel's mother is the mayor, so yeah, there's that. Of course, the idea is still not original to mine. In the end, we also have to always consider that Deltarune is not just a game but a story, so we kind of have to look at Deltarune as if we were looking at Oedipus during high school. So yeah, I feel like Toby Fox is a author and a writer, especially when he has the consistency of making well-made stories. So we have to stop looking at this at a game lore perspective, but looking at this as a story writer perspective. Because don't forget, Toby Fox uses repetition, and is very careful about wording. So take note of that whenever we go into these theories. And the next day, apparently I just barely realized darkness and lightness. It's a literal metaphor to this. As long as we exist, there always should be darkness within us. And as long as there's darkness, we'll always find a way to escape from that reality. And based on the fact that we're basing this video off the reflection theory, pretty much we might have to start theorizing with that literal metaphor that Toby Fox decided to make. What a genius, Toby Fox. What a genius. To turn something so simple to something literally in a literal sense for a video game. Also, this might also be alluding that the final boss might be the collection of everybody's darkest secrets and greatest regrets. Might be an entire accumulation in a physical form and being.